Hey guys, we're back.
How's it going, guys?
You ready to punch some punks in the mean streets?
Yeah, I am. I'm ready to make sure that parents and guardians around the world know to keep their kids away from violent 16-bit video games.
Oh yeah, keep them away. But parents, if you're out there, make sure you play with an original controller. Get your tapping finger going. No turbo auto macro controllers. Get them out of here, man. You've got to get your actual finger going like this.
You hear that? Everybody living in 1993, take that advice.
Yeah. Stay away from third-party controllers. They will ruin your life.
But what are we talking about today, Johnny? What's the topic on the agenda?
We've got an exciting topic. It's rather exciting. It's got all kinds of violence. It's got graphics. It's a bit of the old Namco X Capcom featuring Axel and some wooden dude from Tekken 3. Is that what we're talking about? That doesn't seem quite right. It's kind of in the area.
It is in the area, in a roundabout
that's quite
type of
right.
way.
No, can you tell me the actual title of the game? Because it'll get us a bit closer.
I believe we are talking today about Streets of Rage 2, or are we talking about Bare Knuckle 2? Maybe we're talking about both. Ooh, look at that.
Yeah, talking about a bit of both. But before we get there, there's some movie called Streets of Rage where it comes up if you Google Streets of Rage. So that's why it's in there. But we're not talking about that. Even though she's a perfect weapon. Look at that jeans and that split kick, man. That's going way out there. But no, we'll get rid of that because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this video game here. So get your Google search engine set to 16-bit video games and away from bottom dollar, bottom shelf DVD/VHS rentals back then.
Yeah, you can look that stuff up after this show.
Yeah. And there's much better kicks in this game anyway.
Yeah, we don't care what you do in your private time, folks. We won't judge you if you want to look at that other Streets of Rage stuff. It's okay.
That's fine.
So yeah, though, what a game. What a game. We're gonna deep dive into this. We're gonna remember and relive our experiences playing this. I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, so we're kicking off. We're going to go through sequentially through the game, the stages, the bosses, talk about the music, talk about the legacy and sort of impact of it. And the most important of all, Boba Hicks, character select. He's got 4 stars of power. I don't know how he got 4 stars of power. I only got 1. Did you put in a cheat code or something? How did you get 4 stars?
I went and got out the old SEGA Gamer magazine, flipped it to the back pages with the list of cheat codes, and there it was, right there, in its in its D-pad glory, the combination, the secret combination that's only made available to those who bought the magazine.
Extra lives, extra power. That's the Boba Hicks style. So we move into our first thing here. Big old boring bit of text, but we'll get through this and then it's nice, cool images minus text once we get past this wall of text. It's not unlike fighting the old bonus stage in the car in Street Fighter, or the wall of one of the Streets of Rage where the construction guy comes after. You got to just punch the hell out of it until it crumbles in front of you, and no mercy for this wall of text. Okay, so Streets of Rage. We're talking about number 2, but here's a quick overview and 2 little slides of the whole series. 3 games in the series were released between 1991 and 1994. The first entry, Streets of Rage, introduced the 4 main characters, 3 young former police officers, Axel Stone, Blaze Fielding, and Adam Hunter, and Mr. X, an evil mastermind who was like the boss at the end. It is the only game in the series to feature a Shinobi-style special attack, the Police Special, that defeats all non-boss enemies on screen. Streets of Rage was released for the Sega Mega Drive, Genesis, Master System, Game Gear console, so there was downgraded ports for the 8-bit that were actually feel impressive. And the game was re-released a bunch of times in like the Mega Games, combo editions, and later on like, PlayStation 2, 3, digital networks, yada, yada, yada. The second entry in the series, Streets of Rage 2, had new music influenced by early 90s club music from series composer Yuzo Koshiro, a newcomer composer Motohiro Kawashima, more defined graphics, and a larger selection of moves. It also introduced 2 new characters, Eddie Skate Hunter and Max Thunder, or Sammy Hunter and Max Hatchet in some regions. Like the original titles, Streets of Rage 2 was playable in Sega Genesis, Master System, Game Gear. But what was not playable on those machines was the next one here. I'll hand over to you.
Right. So the third entry to the Streets of Rage series, Streets of Rage 3, was less well received than its predecessors despite enhancements. It was actually seen as being very similar to Streets of Rage 2. So Streets of Rage 3 added a more complex storyline told using cutscenes. The Western version featured increased difficulty, with other elements altered or censored from the Japanese release. The music, again composed by Koshiro and Kawashima, was also criticized for being radically different from the music from the first 2 games. And unlike the 2 preceding games, Streets of Rage 3 was available only on the Genesis. And I will, as an aside, agree with the comments about the music being radically different in Streets of Rage 3. I'm sure we'll get to it later, but it's
Yeah.
It doesn't sound anything like 1 or 2.
It's very different. Like, I played a lot of number 2 and 3. Later on, I got to play a fair bit of number 1. And number 3 is almost like not a true. I mean, it was intended to be a sequel, but it was kind of an unfinished game. The stages are out of order. There's unfinished elements out the wazoo in there. In today's world, or even 90s PC world, it's almost like an expansion of number 2. It's the same engine. They've modified. It's the same graphics. They've modified some of the animations. They've added some things in. It's like an expansion of that game, but it's kind of unfinished. And the music I actually really enjoy. I listen to the soundtrack number 2 and 3 quite a bit, and it's more experimental, and it actually goes into like sort of random sequences of like machine sounds that are randomized that a human couldn't create by themselves, which is one of the kind of cool things about it. But I'm just one of those weirdos that loves like really weird machine noises, your 9-inch nails, as well as liking all your classic techno and dubstep and all that other bullshit that was popular back then. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one here. We've got old Yuzo, or I just call him Yaz or Yaz or whatever. Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima. The soundtracks for Streets of Rage 91 and Streets of Rage 2 92 were influenced by house, techno, hardcore techno, breakbeat, funk, and ethnic music. All the cool shit you were getting on PlayStation and Wipeout and other cool games of the era. Koshiro also attempted to reproduce the Roland TR-808 and TR-9999, not Terminators, these are sound chips, people, beats, and Roland TR-303 synths using FM synthesis. Some of my favorite sounds available to humanity by far. The soundtrack for Streets of Rage 2 in particular is considered revolutionary and ahead of its time for its amazing blend of swaggering house synths, dirty electro funk, and trancey electronic textures would feel as comfortable in a nightclub as a video game. And it sounds like a bit of hyperbole, but I have listened to the full soundtrack of number 2 by itself, which is basically just a rip of the audio in the game. And it is an amazing fucking soundtrack you can listen to by itself, independent of the game, having never played it. And it's fantastic. The music styles of Streets Rage 3 has a different feel to that of the first 2 games. Described by Yuzo Koshiro as a fast beat techno-like jungle, it was composed using his own automated composing system used to produce heavily randomized sequences, which is getting into a mixture of coding and audio sequencing is what he's talking about. The soundtrack also had elements of abstract, experimental, gabba, and trance music. So it was very intentionally experimental. So some people are really turned off by it. I happen to really like it because I like weird ambient shit as well as like hard, fast-paced techno and other stuff. As with Streets of Rage 2, the soundtrack features tracks composed by both Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima, and this is pulled here from good old Wikipedia. I mean, I knew this shit like 20 years ago. I read a whole bunch of interviews, magazine articles, Retro Gamer UK, as well as playing the game easily several hundred times at this point. So, but Wikipedia was a good source, and I chucked this in here. I wasn't going to rewrite the goddamn word was in there because whoever wrote this did it nice and succinctly.
Yes, definitely not as rambling as some of the Wikipedia synopses as you can come
Not
across.
as rambling as
I
this son
think
of a bitch.
not at all, not at all. No, I think
I would have
you
taken 5
know,
slides to
think
say the same shit.
with the music of Streets of Rage 3, it actually kind of reminds me of the music that plays in the club in RoboCop. You know when RoboCop goes to arrest
Yeah.
Leon Nash that
Yes.
will kick Robo in the RoboNad scene. It has a real kind of that kind of beat techno kind of, it's just there's a very similar feel to the music that's playing in that scene that you seem to get a lot in Streets of Rage 3 as you're playing through the game. So yeah, I just like that. There's kind of like a real like industrial feel to it
Yes.
as you're making your
As
way through.
it's kind of one of the coolest things of both 2 and 3 is that Kishiro, who's on the left image there with his old classic old computers and speakers and whatnot, um, he was reacting to what he was saying in his own real time, going to clubs with his mate Kawashima. They were going out to clubs, experiencing this new music, and you've got Japanese DJs doing stuff, you've got UK DJs doing stuff, and globally, it's all influencing each other. And he's putting this into the video game, and so it really makes it a real time capsule of that early, like techno and like kind of elements of trance, dubstep, electronica, dance music. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there, but it makes an awesome time capsule and just amazing soundtracks. And number 3 is like I would call it like discordant. It's like listening to a Nine Inch Nails album, except like maybe you put on Nine Inch Nails album, listen to every track out of order, and that's kind of Streets of Rage 3. It's really discordant, and it's gonna hurt your ears at some point and give you a bit of a headache. But at some point you'll get if you like that kind of music, you're used to it. But if you don't like it, you will never like it. You'll probably hate it. Oh yeah. So bit of
So
Sega history, yeah.
yeah, so Yu Suzuki. So Yu Suzuki is a Japanese game designer, producer, programmer, and engineer who headed Sega's AMZ team. I hope I'm saying that right. For
AM2.
18
It's a
years.
stupid font. I'm sorry, I
Two,
couldn't
two.
change the fucking font to make it more readable.
AM2 team. Okay. So Suzuki joined Sega in 1983. So he's considered one of the first authors of video games. He has been responsible for a number of Sega's arcade hits, including the three-dimensional sprite scaling games that use Tekken Motion Simulator arcade cabinets. So these games are games such as Hang On, Space Harrier, Outrun, and Afterburner. So and pioneering polygonal 3D games such as Virtua Racing and Virtua Fighter, which are credited with popularizing 3D graphics in video games, as well as the critically acclaimed Shenmue series. Apologies, folks, for my butchering of pronunciations during this segment. So, as a hardware engineer, he led the development of various arcade system boards, including the Sega Space Harrier, the Model 1, Model 2, and Model 3, and was involved in the technical development of the Dreamcast console and its corresponding Naomi arcade hardware. So
Yeah.
quite the man,
Well,
Suzuki.
I guess he's kind of like the Sega equivalent of Shigeru Miyamoto, man, for lack of anyone else who could fill that role, you know. So he's a very innovative guy, intelligent, made amazing games, amazing strides in technology and arcade games. And he wasn't involved with Streets of Rage. What's he doing here? Well, I put him in here just kind of background of Sega and what was going on coming out of the 80s into the 90s, the arcade scene. I played a shitload of pretty much all of his games, both in the arcade and the home console versions. And I can't talk about Sega and without putting this fella in here because he's just up there in the pantheon of gaming legends. Um, but the innovations in the 90s Sega were the 3D and also texture mapping, which went on to be used on PlayStation and Tekken and PC and just about bloody everything that some of the stuff this guy developed, along with other people. And absolute legend in gaming. But I thought I'll chuck him in here because in this era, we're heading into early 3D, PC CD-ROM, PlayStation, Nintendo 64. Meanwhile, winding back to the Mega Drive, Streets of Rage 2 and 3, you're getting the best of like 16-bit 2D pixel graphics, which are following on from the old arcade games like your Final Fight and Double Dragon and like your Street Fighter 2 that influences. So it's just kind of juxtaposed like there's all 3D, the whole industry, not just Sega, Nintendo, um, PC, anyone who's making games, they're all heading into that mid 90s period going from 3D. But in the early to mid 90s, we're getting the best of Super Nintendo. We're getting Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3. We're getting Streets of Rage 2 and 3. You're getting the best possible 2D games you can imagine with amazing soundtracks before everything goes off into 3D early technology with some fairly horrible, janky edges on things in the PlayStation era before they managed to smooth things out. But I'll hand over to you, Mark.
Right. So Ayano Kashiro. So Ayano Kashiro, this is a quote from her. I was
Yep.
extremely focused on my work. I just really liked that kind of work. Mostly I did it all on my own, and basically every game I worked on at the time reflected the media I was consuming at the time. For example, I loved Street Fighter 2 back then. It controlled great, and that's why it was important to us that Streets of Rage 2 did the same. Every manga I liked kind of flowed into my games. Again, especially with Streets of Rage 2, it's like clothes. If you find something you like, just put it on. I wish I could say that about clothes, but that's me, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a quote from Ayana Kashiro, who is one of the main designers on Streets of Rage 2, and definitely she mentions there both Street Fighter 2 as a kind of game inspiration, but also the manga that she was interested in as well. And you can definitely see elements
Yeah.
of both of those things heavily influence the look and feel of Streets of Rage 2, as I'm like we're going to get into it shortly, but um yeah, you can definitely see how they inspired her, especially when it comes to Street Fighter 2. If you were to play Streets of Rage 1 and Streets of Rage 2 back to back, one thing you'd probably notice that in Streets of Rage 2 there's almost like a real accuracy to how you hit and deliver blows. It just kind
Yeah.
of it feels
Like the
like every
frames
hit
and the
is
timing, the animation.
yeah, the timing is just perfect, and it's very similar
Hmm.
to Street Fighter 2 and how that
Yeah.
kind of fighting scenario works. Whereas Streets of Rage 1, it was a little bit more, for want of a better term, just a little bit more and not as accurate, and your striking was sometimes just a little bit off,
A
a
bit
little bit
slow.
more janky arcadey style, a bit slower. Whereas Streets of Rage 2, it definitely has that kind of crisp, kind of on
It
point
was smooth,
accuracy.
man, like a Jackie Chan Benny the Jet fight. Everything flowed one move into another, like, you know.
The combos were something you could, kind of barely do in number one, whereas in number two,
Yeah,
it's been refined to a perfect
combos all
almost
day, number
art.
2.
And oh, big time, big time.
Which leads us into our next little thing here. So he's got the look, and this is old Axel from Streets of Rage, but this is just showing kind of the style and influence of what was going on back then. You had old Ken and Street Fighter, and Street Fighter inspired all kinds of other games, fighting games, but games in general. You had Art of Fighting, you had Fatal Fury, you got Terry Bogard, you got Rio, you've got Cody and Final Fight, also from Capcom. But the kind of influence, there's a whole bunch of games coming out back in this era that influence each other. Street Fighter being a big one, and Streets of Rage, of course. But jumping back a little bit before that, all the way back to the 1970s, influencing Final Fight and Streets of Rage was the Warriors. The Warriors come out and play, and also Streets of Fire, the mid 80s, kind of like rockabilly musical slash action movie, which is good fun. Influence the kind of style and look of these games. And like, you've got this, even if you've never seen any of these characters, what can you see? Like they're wearing the tight jeans, they've got the wife beater or singlet, they've got that blonde hair, and they're this kind of weird, stereotypical 80s all American action hero guy who might be played by a Kurt Russell or a Mel Gibson or something in their earlier years. But yeah, the
Yeah,
style, the
they're
fashion.
totally jacked up.
You go.
They're
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
jacked up as
yeah,
well.
yeah. The jeans are
You've got
always
to have
exactly
the
tight enough.
oh yeah, tight jeans, possibly steroid enhanced physique. I'm not making any accusations here, but come on,
Yep.
Axel. Are you telling me you had time to go to the gym and get a body like that while being a full-time police officer? I'm just asking questions here.
But yeah, the little sort of influence behind the scenes as far as what was being developed. Capcom were making a project called Street Fighter 89, which eventually led to two different games, one being Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior, the other being the original Final Fight game. But they both pull from some elements as far as like how the characters are dressed, the sprites, the animation, the combos, the hits, the hit frames. And they were highly influential on the original and number 2 of Streets of Rage. Without Street Fighter, you don't really get Streets of Rage. It pretty much wouldn't exist. But you're taking it from a one-on-one versus fighter to a side-scrolling beat 'em up arcade style fighter. But we're at home on the video game console where we don't have credits and coins, so we can do more with it. With built more on the soundtrack, built more, kind of like longer levels, more expanding on what we used to do in the arcades and into more interesting territory.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned to you before, privately, when we first started kind of discussing that we were going to do a Streets of Rage 2 talk. I actually had things totally backwards because as a kid, I played Streets of Rage before I ever played Final Fight. And by the
Yeah.
time I discovered Final Fight, I thought that
Yeah.
Final Fight was a rip-off of Streets of Rage.
Nope.
I was like, oh,
Yeah, I got to play a
no,
lot of
no,
that
got that
arcade.
completely. Yeah, I got that completely wrong, completely wrong. Yeah, so like you were saying there, if you trace that evolution back, it begins with Street Fighter, and then you've got this interesting branch off where the Street Fighter 89 project splits into Final Fight and Street Fighter 2. But of course, it's Final Fight that ends up being the heavy influence and inspiration for Streets of Rage.
And I had a whole page on that I intended to put in here, like a little diagram drawing lines from one to another, and I saved all the images, and I've been worked on this about 6 hours today, and I forgot to put it in there, so it's not there. So we talked about it, at
Look, you
least.
know what? There's talk, there's rumor that we may be doing like a Street
Yeah.
Fighter chat with another friend of ours, Badger.
Yeah, that's
So
probably going to happen. He's going
there's
to be a new
always,
challenger and jump in.
yeah. So look, there's always if we're going to be talking about Street Fighter, then there's probably going to be room to talk more about Final
Yeah.
Fight. So we'll get back to it, folks.
You
Don't
know
worry,
we're
we
going to
won't
talk about
neglect
Street
it.
Fighter at some point. It's going to happen. But yeah,
Nice
this one
selection
here is
of
just a bunch of
breakable items here.
breakable items and pick upable dirty old wall chickens or turkeys or whatever, and apples. If you find an apple on the ground, you should eat it as fast as you can.
And if you find 3 gold bars on the ground, pick them up
Definitely
and
pick
bring
them
them to
up.
my house. Yeah.
But a one up worth more than a gold bar or a dirty street apple for sure. But yeah, getting past this
Oh yeah.
nonsense. Oh, I've booted up Mark. I've booted up and getting the feels now, seeing a bit of this.
Yeah. So for our American viewers, listeners, you guys will be booting up your Sega Genesis, but I think me and Johnny will boot up our Mega Drives instead.
Mega Drive, 16
Got that
bits,
Mega
got
Drive
blast
fired up.
processing.
Mega
Yeah,
Drive
booted
Mark
up.
II, baby.
We got to that title screen. Yeah, that's what I had. The Mark II had those red buttons and a big black plastic square and red buttons. Booted up 92 SEGA Music Yuzo Koshiro, which is very unusual to see any kind of credit on a title screen in a video game in the 16-bit era, because most of the Japanese developers use pseudonyms, and you would see credits in the game and a bunch of nonsense names. So to see on the title screen is very unusual. But the first staged old Axel pulling off a Kurt Angle style suplex to some stupid punk who probably deserves it.
Yeah, he definitely deserved it. He shouldn't have been loitering on the street corner. But yeah,
Definitely not.
what a great screen capture. And yeah, I love the throws. I love that dynamic, and
Yeah,
that's one thing I'm glad they did carry over from the first game was that kind of throw dynamic, which could see your character
they had a lot
execute
of
some nasty
animations in that
looking
first game, all the
suplexes,
hits and the throws.
and even just the screenshot alone, it's a pretty good example of how the graphics have been really enhanced from where we were in the first Streets of Rage to where we are now with Streets of Rage 2, because even this punk that's being thrown, look at all the colors in that sprite. He's got like the white hair, the brown skin, the yellow jacket,
Yeah,
the black
there's a lot of
pants.
programming tricks going
Whereas
on to get that to happen.
in the first game, the punks that were kind of drawn like that were basically like 2 colors. They'd either be like green and
Yeah,
dark green, or brown and purple, something that's kind of really just not as colorful, and it doesn't look like it's taking from as rich a color palette. But straight away you can see with Streets of Rage 2, everything just feels enhanced and bigger. The sprites themselves look large and more in scale with the actual backgrounds, whereas in the first game they did just look a little bit small. Like sometimes it felt like your main character was like a 3 3/4 inch figure kind of navigating through like a 6 inch scale
yeah, it's true.
background. Whereas here it feels like everything actually scales together. The sprites and the backgrounds within the levels actually work really well, and the whole thing just adds to it visually that it's so impressive, colorful, and smooth looking.
That's one of the things I love about number two is that the sprites. The first game, the characters are kind of all tall and skinny, and they're number two, they're a bit wider, and it reminds me of when they went from old Street Fighter Two, World Warrior, Hyper, Super into the Alpha series, where the characters are so much more fuller and anime, and their arms are chunky, and their big chunky torsos and waist. Same sort of thing going on here. The sprites feel so much more filled in, and you really feel like you're in the 16-bit world, seeing the bloody suplexes and punches and super specials.
It just looks awesome. Oh, I love these screen grabs. This is just
and the backgrounds with like the rain, the fake lighting, and then you got all the music going at the same time. A lot of programming tricks going on to get the best out of the limited color palette of the Mega Drive, and programming tricks just out the wazoo to get all the stuff happening at once. And like, you've got other games on the Mega Drive that look really just ugly as dirt, and some awful machine-like noises that are just really hurt your ears, not in a good way, but just terrible sounding games on Mega Drive, as well as good arcade ports. And then you got people that make this goddamn machine just sing the best possible thing it can do, the best graphics, the best sound, the best gameplay, all in one thing.
Yeah, when Streets of Rage 2 is running in your Mega Drive or Genesis, it's literally firing on all cylinders. You're getting the most out of that machine, and this initial kind of collection of images really just kind of captures that sentiment perfectly. Even just how everything is lit, like and how everything is designed in such a way where light and shadows and simple things that you nearly take for granted as just kind of being there, but it all just blends together to make,
Yeah,
especially
most
to make
16-bit
what at the
games
time
aren't.
looks great.
Yeah. But most 16-bit games that aren't Donkey Kong Country don't have shadows or any kind of faux lighting or anything. They're more cartoony and simple, like a Super Mario World. Fantastic game, which does have a shadow, but it's just a circle. It's not an accurate shadow. But they're just flat, plain colors. Whereas here, this is a 2D plane, but you get a sense of depth and perspective, like looking at a good painting or a piece of art. You've got a foreground, middle ground, and background, and you've got all these colors, the lighting, there's all kinds of things going on at the same time. And to cram all that into the limited memory and limited cartridge space back then with all the program tricks was just fantastic.
And the whole time you're getting these impressive visuals, you're also hearing the kick-ass,
Mm-hmm.
music. It's the Go Straight theme that's kind of, playing near the start, but like just everything's just coming together. Every punch you're landing is making this like brilliant sound effect. Every hit you
Yeah.
take, when even the kind of the whoosh of the air as you throw a character or they hit the ground. It's just
Yeah.
excellent sound effects. There's a real kind of impact to everything that's happening on screen. It just feels like it feels weighty and heavy.
Yeah.
And like
It's
you're
like the best
mentioning
70s
there, like
kung fu movies. All that foley and sound is like really just in your face.
especially when there's a bit of a combo going, so your fists are moving fast. It actually sounds like they took sound samples from like a Bruce Lee movie or something where you're hearing all that
Mm.
in quick succession. Like it's just it's a really impressive use of the soundboard hardware on the machine, and just like you were saying, getting the most out of it. It's also straight away you notice as well when you're playing this game in comparison. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to keep referencing the first game a lot because there is such a leap between the two. It does feel like you need to point out how much of an improvement or how bigger things get, because one thing you notice straight away in this game pretty early on is it's a lot busier. There's a lot more stuff kind of happening on screen. So
There is.
you could have like multiple enemies coming at you, and it's different enemy types. It's not repeating the same enemy as often. They're mixing things up a lot. So they definitely straight off the bat kind of get you into thinking, if you've been playing the first game, you're in a kind of a larger world where kind of it's bigger and badder and there's a lot more stuff going on. Even the fact that you're not just moving in a straight line the whole time across the screen. Like in that first stage, you actually get an arrow pointing downwards to go
Yeah,
down the
like
street instead
diagonal.
of just across. It's really and once again, it's a simple thing. Obviously you're on a 2D screen, so you're not really moving the thing at all. Like it's just a different kind of trick to make you think that, I don't know, you're actually in a more 3D playing field, even though it's just a 2D image you're looking at. But it's like it's little things like that that really add to the game. And once again, it's just especially noticeable if you go from playing the first entry to playing this entry in kind of quick succession. You're like, wow, they've really scaled things up a lot here.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks going on as far as like forced perspective, like a painting or piece of art where it's a 2D plane. We're going to kind of fake 3D, fake backgrounds, colors, shadows, lighting, and just a whole evolutionary leap from the first game to the second game, taking nothing away from the first game, which is a fantastic fucking game, but like it's quite slow. It's like going back and playing Double Dragon or Renegade. It's very much of its time. Excellent game, but the whole visuals and aesthetics of it from the first Streets of Rage carry over into 2 and 3 of critical importance. Probably the backgrounds, the colors, and the music carries over and evolves into the other games to reflect what was going on to music and club scenes at the time, and just propels the game to be more than the sum of its parts, like, and just to be technical marvels, programming marvels, but just on a gameplay level, so much fun to play, and just a real treat for all your senses when you're getting into it.
Great enemy design as well. Like, of course, you got like this
Yeah,
Ultimate Warrior style dude about to leap on top of Axel here, but also, in the previous slide we saw those kind of almost like Mad Max Road Warrior / Legion of Doom looking
yeah,
biker guys, just
yeah,
really
they're cool.
colorful and imaginative, designs for these characters. And
A
this
lot of
dude
the
here, I
character
always
design
just
was that
referred.
Ayano Kashiro.
Yeah, exactly. That manga influence, design. But I mean, I'm guessing you're kind of like me. Did you always call these wrestler guys Ultimate Warriors? I just always referred to him as like Ultimate
Well,
Warrior
that's just
when
Ultimate
I was fighting
Warrior,
him.
and even I like. Do you know what his name is kind of a reference to? If you see it says Abadidi, is like, it's like, to me that makes me think of a Bobo Double Dragon.
Uh, could
I
be,
don't know
because
if it's intentional or not, but just the spelling of it makes me think,
this is actually a good time now to bring up another difference in this game, apart from your own character's health and
this guy
energy
was in the
bar.
first game as well, but they've redrawn his whole
That's right.
sprite.
That's right. You fight him on the beach in the first game, and also in the last level, he takes a run at you as well. But no, I was just going to say that another difference in this game compared to the first one is that you can now actually see the enemy's energy bar, not just your
Yeah,
own.
yeah, that's
They
a
didn't have that
good
in
thing
the
they
first
did.
game. The only time you ever got anything like that in the first game was when you were fighting a boss character. You could see how much energy they had left, but you couldn't tell when you were fighting your average enemies what their energy was. But that was a nice little addition in Streets of Rage 2 to add the enemy energy bar.
Yeah, it was a good little thing to add in.
It's the little things that all add up to make it a kind of a better game in a lot of ways, at least from a technical level, even if you're maybe on the fence stylistically of what you prefer. But it's so impressive. And once again, this screen grab, it just captures it perfectly. Look at those background sprites of the actual crowd,
Like an
watching the fight.
underground
It's
fight
just,
club
yeah, it's really impressive. It's really
or
impressive.
wrestling, and
And
that
when
maybe if
you're
it was
actually,
ECW.
yeah, but of course, like when you're watching this as well, there's movements, there's use of more that kind of visual trickery just to give it a really animated, like you're
Yeah,
saying,
there's
like that kind
little
of
like
fight club,
animations of the
fight pit
crowd,
feel.
and
It's just really cool. And I know, like, if anybody kind of maybe younger than us that grew up in the 3D gaming age, they're probably thinking like, what are these guys getting so happy about? Little 2D sprites moving up and down in the background. This was
oh,
a big
they
deal,
kicked
and
the ass of
especially,
this 3D shit we got now, man.
oh yeah, and look, it just, as a kid, this was our bread and butter, and you got immersed in that world, and like little things like that, like having a moving sprite in the background, just made it that maybe a little bit more realistic. As crazy as it sounds to say that a 2D 16-bit game can be realistic, once you got kind of sucked into it and got immersed in what you were doing, you just like your imagination would run wild, and you just kind of go with the flow. So
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that they have all these like extra little moving sprites and background things going on. I just think it enhances the whole experience that you're actually on a journey and battling your way through a real environment in this city.
Yeah, working within technical limitations of limited technology really brings out some real artistry. I mean, it also brings out some crap licensed video games, but when you got good people who know what they're doing, brings out some real artistry in video games. And when you've got just unlimited resources, RAM memory, and unlimited animations, artists, production budget, the 100+ people working on your game, that doesn't mean it's going to be a good game. It just means that it's going to be a game. Doesn't mean it's going to be good. Doesn't mean having more money and more people is better. Sometimes less is more. I'll just touch on before we get into the stage specific stuff here, because there was another slide I was going to put in. I didn't, out of time, I didn't put it in, so I'm going to just read from my show notes here. And this is talking about Streets of Rage 1, 2, and 3, the soundtracks from old YK, old composer man. I just call him Kaz. And I'm reading out like a quote here talking about the contrast of the series compositions for the soundtracks. And it says, as for creating Streets of Rage, in those days, I used to go to many dance clubs and loved to listen to a lot of dance music. I took those essences into the sounds and programmed eagerly to recreate for Sega Genesis. Streets of Rage 1 style is like house music. Streets of Rage 2 style is like hardcore techno, which also has ambient, also and other stuff in it. As for Streets of Rage covered many kind of dance musics, and this is like a literal translation from Japanese, so some of the sentences are a bit kind of nonsensical. I figured out a new composing formula for Streets of Rage, the so-called automated composing system to create fast beat techno-like jungle. So he did do distinctly 3 different styles across the 3 games, which, to me makes them more unique and more interesting and more memorable when you go back and play them again. You can easily sit down and listen to the soundtracks from each of these 3 games and go, I can see what's similar, but I can see what's different. They've all got an element of some kind of electro techno in there, but they've also got slower beat intro music for the starting up credits, the story, the outro credits, has very limited cutscenes, that kind of world building, and it has these little moody atmospheric pieces, little beach at sunset time, little chill beats before it builds up to the and like real in your face kind of factory industrial sounds again. So we'll hand over to you, Mark. We're heading into we've gone into stage 2 and 3. We've got some weird alien eggs on the ground. We've got a strange carnival and some pirate. We've got ninjas on a big pirate ship, not unlike that old Super Mario 3. We've got bare knuckle arcade games, and we've got a baseball field with a bit of a secret compartment in the old circle at the end of that baseball field.
It's quite the selection of kind of quick fire environments we get here. And you got that pirate ship. Yes, like just like in the Mario game, also like in is it Turtles in Time? You fight in a pirate ship as well.
Yes, yes.
I I,
Because it's like in
I
this
think I
game, it's an
remember.
amusement park with these levels.
Yeah, it kind of went over my head a bit the first time I played this game, that I was actually
Oh,
in an
me too,
amusement
for
park.
years. And I was like, oh, it's an amusement park. Years like, oh, okay, now it makes sense, all this crazy
Yeah.
stuff that's going on in these levels.
Because when you go into the place with the alien eggs, I think is supposed to be kind of like a haunted house style
Yeah, yeah.
setup,
It's like
I
going
guess.
on a ghost train or haunted house. Yeah,
But yeah, the first time you play through that, you're just kind of like, what is going on? I thought I was
yeah.
playing Streets of
And that has
Rage,
that
not
boom,
Alien
boom,
Storm.
boom, 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 like kind of deep, bassy music going.
And the kind of explodable items or breakable items are
Yeah, they
alien
explode
eggs.
and hurt you.
And they clearly have the outline of like a xenomorph, almost queen
Yeah, it's
inside
total
them.
giga
Like
going on in that background.
But what a great kind of setting. The music is excellent during this point as well. You can
And
say
it
that about
matches up
any of the
so
stages.
well as you go through the level, the tones and beats, which is amazing because it's not real-time music. It's just timed that it's trying to play when you get to that part of the level, as opposed to dynamic real-time music, which is fairly common in new sort of PlayStation 3 onwards era games.
It works perfectly. It works perfectly, and there's like kind of foggy kind of smoke effects used, I guess, with a bit of parallax scrolling to
Yeah,
kind of give you the impression
yeah,
that
it's
you're in
got some
this kind of
transparency,
misty.
Super Nintendo style.
Yeah, it just looks really, really impressive. And of course, that's another thing about this game, because you've got these really exotic and kind of wild settings. It just makes it so visually striking, especially in comparison to the first game. Because in the first game, apart from maybe when you go to the factory or go to the beach, most of the stages really were literal just fighting on a street. It was always like just a similar type of environment. At least it felt like that. Whereas
Yeah,
here you've gone from the streets to a club to a bar to a pirate ship, to a weird alien haunted house type of thing. It's throwing a lot at you, and
and
it's
then
all
the
very
baseball
different
stadium.
to what's came before. Yeah, the baseball stadium. But at least by the I
And then you're
suppose
on
by
a
the
ship,
time we get
an
to the
actual ship, not
yeah,
the pirate ship from the amusement park. And that's a real ship for some reason. Not that you'd know that
yeah,
playing it.
it is just and look, I don't mean to be unfair on Streets of Rage 1 when I make these comparisons. Like I love the first Streets of Rage. Like it's one of my most favorite video games of all time. I'm just pointing out that there was real significant leaps made in this game, and it takes some real creative steps in terms of type of
Yeah.
environment that you're fighting
I'd
in
happily
and
play a
moving around
remake
in.
that was all the first game, but with the engine of number two, just all the levels and in order, music, everything, but with the sprites and animations of number two would be good.
Yeah, me too, definitely. And the baseball kind of stadium is just good fun as well. Smacking around with these punks that are trying to ruin your
Yeah, you get
day.
some steel pipes and bats and knives and
And it leads, of course, to a classic kind of trope of a side-scrolling beat 'em up, but also just a Streets of Rage tradition of, an elevator. You're either going to go up or down. In this
yeah, the
case, I think
elevator.
you go down to this secret tunnel, I guess, underneath this baseball field and battling these punks left and right. It's great fun just to kind of knock your way through this game. And like when you do get onto that ship as well, that's in a forgive me if I don't know their correct names, but I always just call them like the fat barrel boys, the guys who kind of like run at you and like breathe fire and stuff.
Fat
They just
boys. Boop, boop, boop,
yeah, the
boop,
fat
boop.
boys. Yeah, they just they try and ruin your day, especially when there's lots of
Their bloody
enemies on
body
screen
splashes
around
and
them.
flaming carnal style flames coming out of their mouth.
Yeah, which is another
And those fat
classic
boys
enemy
appear in a whole
trope
bunch
of the
of other
time.
beat 'em up games in that area too. They're like a kind of generic
That's
enemy
right.
that's in so many games.
Yeah, it's so strange, the fire-breathing fat man, because it's in Final Fight as
Who can
well,
leap in
isn't
the
it?
air
Yeah,
and do a big belly splash like Zangief style.
yeah, tough enemies, definitely. They throw a lot at you, so apart from like the fat guys and the punks, you've also got like random kung fu guys coming on as well, and
Yeah, you got the ninjas and you've got the ninjas and I guess you call them kung fu guys who do the big kicks with the kind of tied back hair buns and shaved front head. Oh, and
yeah,
the
it's just
kickboxer guys. Don't forget the Thai boxers.
it's such a kind of colorful selection of different enemies,
Yeah,
and it keeps everything kind of visually fresh on screen as you're playing through, and it just
you
feels
get a
like there's
real
always
mix of
something
them
new and
stage to
colorful,
stage. And those
and it
biker
causes
punks
you as
come
a
back in too that throw grenades at you.
oh yeah, bastards. They don't care about killing their own guys either. The amount of their
No,
own
no, they hit
guys
their
that
own
get
guys.
completely nerfed. Yeah, it is a satisfying feeling though when you dodge one of those grenades only for one of their guys to fall victim to it. It's like,
Yes,
ha,
I
fuck
love it.
you.
I love dodging them and like take it, you stupid NPC, get damage from your own guy.
Yeah, there they are. There, sneakily hiding at the window. Yeah, but what a brilliant kind of run of settings just as we're moving through stage 5 and 6 here. The
I love,
beach looks fantastic. And once
yeah,
again,
the beach looks amazing. It's not even
lovely
intentional,
effect.
just those two shots lined up, you could actually see the wave going all the way out to the edge.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's great. That's brilliant. So it is. Yeah,
Total
and even
accident.
just it's even though you're kind of fighting all these guys and it is an intense situation, it is a really nice piece
Yeah.
of music that's kind of playing
That,
the whole time you're going
stage
through.
four, I love the stage 4 boss who's like an old-time strongman, overweight, what's in it, like King Kong Bundy style guy. He's like a boxer
Yes.
slash strongman in the kind of swimsuit, and he dances about with his toes. He does big uppercuts like Ryu style, and he's probably he's probably the most difficult boss in the game, more than the final boss or the other ones, because he's got so many untouchable frames where you can't hurt him and he can hurt you. And even when you do your super unblockable special thing, sometimes he'll just like spam you right through it and miss and still hit you. He's a complete bastard that you can waste like several lives and even a continual.
He's tough, definitely. And yeah, he does have the look of that old school carnival strong
I love that
man, you
look. He's
know,
got the
it's
bald head. He's got the round belly, the kind of spandexy strongman clothes, and then the and he's wearing boxing gloves. He's such a weirdo. I love him.
yeah. It's the type of guy like where he's standing in a ring probably at a carnival while some guy is trying to like
Yeah,
get members of the audience to fight him, you know, and if you win, you'll get
that's
some
my
money, but
weight.
you're not going to win because he's going to beat your ass.
No, he might look like an out of um overweight, out of condition schlub like an Adrian Adonis, but if you mess with him, he's gonna fuck you up. Don't do it.
Yeah, he's one tough hombre. He definitely wouldn't have any mercy in Mr. T if they made him do a boxing match with him in Madison Square Garden. I'll say that
No,
much for him.
no way. But yeah, you got the beach, walking through some kind of foresty areas, more punks on bikes and fat men or fat boys, and you got the old whip girls, and you got the boss of the claw guy. Which when I was a kid, we were like, oh man, that's like Blanka in Street Fighter. He's got claws and weird hair, but it's actually more of a kind of Japanese traditional outfit. But it always just reminds me of Blanka because he spins through the air and he's got claws and weird hair,
Yeah, I
and it
always
leads
got
into
the Blanca vibes as
yeah,
well from that guy.
and it leads into this industrial factory in the next level, which is a weird level, but it kind of has a. I won't break the fucking talk here, but that part of the factory actually is like a major part of Streets of Rage 3, this factory business. But I won't crap on about it here because we can talk about that another time. But you listen to this factory, and there's yet another elevator level, but see, this time we're going up rather than down, and it's one of those big Metal Gear Solid style elevators, like a giant square that takes like half an hour to get from one point to the other, like military style. And we got the
Mm.
more Thai kickboxer guys, boss battle to robot guys, and then you get like a boss endurance with the boxer dude again, like the strongman guy, the warrior, the blanket dude, and I'll hand back over to you to talk about these areas.
Yeah, what a gauntlet that is you have to run when you have to go
Yeah,
through those bosses again.
just when you think you
I
got some
was
balls of steel.
yeah, you're about to get crunched there, but
Yep.
no, funny you should mention about the factory going to kind of play a fairly pivotal role in Streets of Rage 3. That same factory setting, and I guess the guys must have really just liked the look and feel of it. But even in the first game, there is actually a very similar factory level
Yes.
stage that I think even uses some of the same actual assets that are used in number two
Ah,
and number three, like because
maybe
if you
they
were to
just like the
compare,
Terminator.
they must have really liked it. Yeah, it must have really heavily kind of weighed on them that they just really loved the look and feel of that type of industrial factory. But yeah, that gauntlet you run of the kind of previous bosses, it messes you up. But it's it's I suppose it's getting you ready for what's yet to come because
Yeah,
we're getting close to the end, even though we're not quite at the
very
end.
close to the end.
There's just yeah, there is it's kind of it's another kind of trope, I suppose, of games of this era where they do just throw everything at you on the
Yeah,
lead up
everything
to the
and the kitchen
finale.
sink, the chicken, the
And
apples, everything. The one-ups are throwing all at you at once.
I don't know about you, but maybe it's just my style of play and possibly my slow reactions. I always kind of
Mm.
fare better going up against boss characters that are like big and strong as opposed to ones that can leap and jump around fast. I always struggled with like
Oh,
the
the leaping
fast,
and jumping ones
picky
are
characters.
bastards.
Yeah. That's why I lose the most energy and the most lives always.
Yeah,
It's like you just want to get past them. They're just
you've
eating
gotta
away at
you've
your
gotta
energy, like, you know.
learn the tricks. There's certain bosses like the blanket claw guy and the boxing old time wrestler strongman guy. They will just knock the seven shades of shit out of you the first time. So you'll probably get a game over the first time through if you get to them. You've got to learn the tricks and the animations. Where's the gaps you can hurt them? Certain bosses you can beat easily, like the big wrestler, warrior looking guy. Every time he runs at you, you can just jump kick him over and over again and beat him and not lose a hit once you know that trick. But other bosses will knock you out of every type of animation, even your invincible frames for your like super type attack that takes up your takes up your life bar. But you've got to learn all the little tricks a bit at a time. And while this is a console game, that's very Sega, that's very arcade style playing old Shinobi or Golden Axe. You're going to get punished. You're going to get beaten. You're going to get punished. You're not putting coins into the machine anymore, but you're still going to lose big time. And you're just going to have to deal with it, man. Um, there are some cheats in this game, but it's like to get some extra continues and lives and whatever. The difficulty is still there, which you can change. But if you play on too low a difficulty, you won't get a proper ending. You play on at least medium to hard to get the actual true game and ending and not abbreviated. But you've got to learn the tricks. It's still a legacy of the old arcades. Learn a stage at a time, boss at a time, what works, what are the invincible frames, what are the hits where you're going to get hit or they're going to get hit. And you might think, I know it all. And then you try playing on the hardest difficulty and just everything changes. All of a sudden, the weakest enemy kicks your ass and will give you a game over if you don't know what you're doing. So it's very scalable and it's a testament to how well it was programmed, how well the hit detection was done. Like I've played this game off and on for more than 20 years, and yet I can go on YouTube and watch someone doing some crazy walkthrough where they're doing virtually no hits and whatever. I think, man, that's fucking impossible. I could never do that. But they've probably edited a bunch of different videos together to do that, not in one go. I mean, there are some superhumans out there, but for the average person playing it, you're just going to learn a piece at a piece at a time, incremental progress. Not like going to the gym and going, I can lift 10 kilos this week, maybe in 2 weeks, 20 kilos. Maybe in 6 to 8 weeks, it's 30 kilos. 6 months later, maybe I can lift 50, 80, 100 kilos. That's how it goes in this game. You've got to learn a piece at a time. You can't rush through it. You've just got to be patient, learn a piece, learn a piece. And once you can do it, you can finish the game in about an hour. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of those Sega games at the time where it pays off to be careful and be patient
Yeah.
initially when you're playing the game, because the idea is to
It
stack up
won't take
on
100
lives.
hours like Assassin's Creed or
Yeah,
Skyrim. Once you actually invest the time in it, you can finish it pretty quick and then
but I
play it again.
suppose as a my tactics were pretty similar across the three games in the trilogy, and that was always to amass as much extra lives as possible
Yeah, you
prior
need
to
those
getting
lives,
to the
man.
final stage, because the
Get
final
the points,
stage
get the one up.
is when you start using them up. But like you said, it's a learning curve even from the very get-go. If you just take your time and don't always rush forward to get to the next part of the screen, you want to even with the normal enemies, I'm not even talking about bosses here. If you get that rhythm right where you can keep just slow punching an enemy that he can't escape that frame, and you can even
Yeah.
switch between two enemies doing the same thing where you're essentially keeping them both stunned at the same time until you've knocked
Mhm.
out the both of them. And if you like anybody who would watch me playing Streets of Rage 2 would probably get pretty bored pretty quick because I kind
It's
of
like watching
progressed
an
so
actual
slowly.
wrestling match, not a show wrestling. It's just going to be
Yeah,
little movements.
little movements, little incremental movements as I'm kind of carefully making my way through,
I
and
can wait you
just
out,
gathering up
motherfucker. I can slow
lives.
punch you
Yeah.
all day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But but I think it's kind of encouraged to an extent because they know that you're going
Yeah.
to keep coming back
It's
and
like the
coming
old
back
jump
to the
kicks
game.
and the arcade beat 'em ups. Do a jump kick, do a jump kick if you want to get far on one credit.
Yeah, and you're kind of timing everything like this. Once you're hitting
Yeah.
one guy, you're turning around to the next guy who's just recovering from the previous hit, and nobody's landing a
Yeah, you're
blow
looking
on
for
you.
that
And as
timing.
long as
Which
you
enemy's gonna walk in, who's gonna rush in, and who's the faster enemy, and
deliberately keeping certain enemies alive a bit longer, so it won't generate a new enemy to replace them. There's
yes,
all sorts of little
yes,
tricks
classic tactic.
you can use.
Speaking of
But of course,
timing,
everybody has their own style.
yeah, for sure, it's very flexible in that way. And speaking of timing, we might do a little intermission here. We're going to do a little short break. For people watching, it'll be very short. For us in the real world, we can use as much time as we want. We're going to hit the pause here. And we're back from a little intermission there. There's
Just have
boss
to
battles,
continue.
man. Boss battle rush, tough.
Yeah, I thought we were going to run out
I
of
need a
lives
break
there
from.
for a sec. Yeah,
And
so
after boss battles, you get more boss
running
battles. Fighting two
more
robots at
boss
once.
battles.
Yeah,
Two
these ones have got
robots that
bloody
have
big spiky ball things that
extendable.
swing out at you and spin around. But these guys are actually pretty easy. You can use the old arcade jump kick trick and stay away from them. You can get near, zone them up and down, do jump kicks, and pretty much beat them with nearly no damage.
These guys, I don't know what it is about them. They remind me a bit of the that episode of Batman the animated series. I think it's a two-parter.
Yes,
Part of Steel, I think it's called. The robots that are replacing people. They have that kind of
mhm,
red eye in the center. Yeah, it always
yeah,
kind of reminds me of that. But yeah, it gets a little bit more into the science fiction realm, I suppose, when we're dealing with these guys. Even though we did get a taste of that earlier in the weird alien slash ghost house that is in a
yeah.
theme park or whatever. But here we're dealing with some actual robots. And of course, without jumping the gun too much, because I'm sure we'll talk about it in detail someday,
Number 3.
robots are a big part of number three, so we're getting a little
Yeah,
taster of
there's a whole
that.
factory of robots in number 3.
Oh
There's
yeah,
some real science fiction territory.
yeah.
But yeah, we fight these
The entire
guys,
plot.
and then we got to face Mr. X, who just does not give a fuck. He's just sitting there like, whatever. It's like, who's this
He's
idiot?
so bored. He's so bored.
Yep,
He's like, this asshole again.
yep.
He's like, you again? Didn't you come here last year and didn't we
Didn't you
fight
fall
this
through a
out?
trap floor and have to repeat some levels?
Yeah. Didn't I didn't I make that offer to you and your friend that if you joined me, we could
Yeah,
rule the city together, but then instead I
I'll
sent you
join you.
back to stage
That
6.
little that little oblong outline on the floor is not a giveaway about a possible trap floor again.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's a real
But yeah, this
bastard
is
of a
quite
thing.
the
It's like, join me. It's like yes, so then get sent back 2 levels and waste all your lives and continues.
or used to be pretty cool if you're doing two-player cooperative and when he asks you to join him, if one person says yes and one person says no, then you would have
Gotta
to fight
fight each
each
other.
other.
Yeah.
And then the winner of that fight gets sent back 2 levels.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. I forget about because I never got to play right 2 and 2 players, but I knew about it in general. So that's another cool feature of the game. Really, this little bonus thing. You thought I fought through this goddamn boss battles, boss gauntlet run, and wasted my lives. Got up to him and went, "Oh yeah, I'll turn heel. I'll see what maybe I'll get some fat cash." No, go back several levels. You just wasted all that time.
Yeah, I used to get into some scraps with my mates playing sometimes when one of us would make the wrong decision.
Everyone's not me is
But
wrong.
but yeah, you run your little gauntlet here now at the end of Streets of Rage 2. We're going to be fighting a variety of punks, but of course Shiva is there ready to jump in and start throwing hands and throwing kicks.
Throw
And you
some
got to
kicks
do
big
a bit
time.
of do a bit of Shiva fighting first before Mr. X finally gets up off his lazy arse and he remembers that he has a
And he,
massive gun that he probably could have used earlier on,
yeah,
but he did this
Tommy gun
last time as
style.
well.
And he shoots his own guys as well as you.
It's so funny. It's so funny. And I always loved, once again, it's something that a modern gamer would just take for granted, but it's little attention to detail. I loved it as
Yeah.
Mr. X is unloading on you, that you can see all the shell casings coming out of the gun and kind of just like
Yeah.
falling on the
I
floor.
tried to get it was hard to get a screen capture of that. I just had a long play from YouTube. I didn't have time to play it myself, so I downloaded a long play and I was going frame by frame, getting whatever I could. So I purposely tried to get one where it had the shell casings.
So I wonder now, Johnny, though, is we're going to beat Mr. X. Is he definitely going to be
Yeah.
like defeated this time? It's just because I thought,
He's
in the last
absolutely
game we defeated him.
defeated. There's no way he's coming back in the third game as a robot clone with the disincarnate human brain that you'll fight as some kind of Japanese style super robot at the end of the third game. Not a lucid dream. That's actually
Yeah.
description of part of the third game. But
Yeah,
yeah,
he
he'll
comes
be
back
back
as
all right.
Kane from RoboCop 2, essentially.
Pretty much, pretty much. He's like
Brain
a
robot.
brain in a robot suit, and you fight robot duplicates of him earlier in the game where his skin melts off, and you see the upper half of him is just a robot Terminator style thing, and the bottom half of him is still the suit of that sprite there. And even when I played number two, I kind of half expect him to turn into a robot, even though that was not till the next game because my memories kind of merged together of which game it happens in.
See here at the ending screen as well that you rescue
It's where you get your
Adam, who'd be.
soft beats from the streets.
Yeah, I'm guessing that because this was like your main foray into the series, that you probably weren't as bothered by the fact that Adam wasn't a playable character in this game as a lot of the other
No,
fans
because
were.
I played Streets of Rage 2 first before I got to play the first one. I played 2 and 3, and years later, I got to play the first one. So I didn't really know who Adam was, other than seeing the old mega machines and video games going on about the old game. And I saw a lot of comic book ads that showed off the first Streets of Rage, the animations. So I knew the character existed, but I wasn't like, oh, Adam's not it. I'm like, okay, well, there's a guy in a game I've never played, so I don't care. But Adam's actually a really good character in the first game. He's got the big long range kicks, good fast combos. He's a good character to play as in the first game.
Yeah, he's I described the fighting style of Adam in the first game as being quite similar to Axel's in this game. Axel kind of
Hmm.
stole some of his moves, so to speak. He has a slightly different move
Yeah,
style in the first game.
it's a bit
But
of boxing and
yeah, I
some
do
fast and
know
also.
it did kind of bother a few folks that Adam wasn't in the sequel as a playable character. And it's something that continues on as well because once again, jumping the gun to number three, he only appears for a second flying a helicopter in number
It's gone
three
for
to
20 plus
just
years until number 4.
yeah, yeah. So whatever the issue was with having him as a playable character, I guess though they wanted to introduce, even though him and Axel are different, they are still quite similar. So they probably didn't want two
Yeah,
similar fighting styles taking up a slot, an extra character slot or whatever.
they're probably the
Um,
best contrast in this one because you got Max, who's your big wrestler guy. He's slow, but his throws do crazy damage. You got Axel, Blaze, Skate the fast character, Axel the all rounder, Blaze who's very fast and does lesser damage, but if you know how to play her well, she's a very lethal character to choose.
yeah, and I suppose that's one thing we kind of forgot to mention at the beginning was apart from going kind of bigger and better with the graphics, the music, and everything else, they also gave us an extra character, because in the first game you could only select from 3 characters, whereas now you can select from 4. And like you mentioned there, you've got
Yeah, they are.
very
Matt and
contrasting
Blaze
styles.
and Boba Hicks. I chose Boba Hicks and did a good playthrough with him earlier tonight.
Yeah, Boba Hicks with the spin kicks gets the job done, and you have
4
fun.
stars of power. He's a bit
Oh yeah.
overpowered, but I can forgive him. But yeah, good
Some people these
combos, good
days,
moveset.
is he overpowered or is he just right? Let us know in the comments.
Well, he's overpowered, but he's been asking for all sorts of royalties, and he's been trying to get trying to write all his own storylines on future episodes and pretty much take over the company NWO style. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Boba Hicks.
Well, look, I'm just trying to protect the integrity of my character and just making sure that I get the best possible deal here, And of course,
Does
the
that work for
network.
you, brother?
Yeah, look, as long as the network are happy, they'll continue to pay me the big bucks, and that's what I'm all
They'll
about.
extend your
The big
contracts. They'll
bucks.
guarantee at least $25,000 per pay per view, and plus royalties and merchandise and whatever else.
The merchandise for the Boba Hicks Funko Pops is going to be through the roof.
Oh yeah, through the roof. If it's up to
They
me, I'd
definitely
just
won't
melt
be.
them on a bonfire, but it's not up to me. So
I was going to say they definitely won't be digging a hole somewhere in a desert and like dumping thousands of them in.
landfill.
But yeah, like we're hitting the final moments of the game here. You see these kind of stills.
I'm
So
ready to pump my fists
what's
in the
your
air.
do you still go back and play this game? Like, is it still one of your go-to games to play?
I do. Like I finally got the I mean, I've still got my actual Streets Rage to a Mega Drive, but it's hard to play it on a modern HD TV. You got all sorts of cables and fuck arounds and waste of money. I'm like either play it on PC emulation, which I can on this PC here. I'm sitting at now, or I had my PS2 version on the old Mega Drive Games Collection, or sorry, PS3. But I've got the PS4 version of the Mega Drive Games Collection, which is the main machine I still play. I don't have a PS5. I'm in no rush to buy one. I might get one eventually. There's fuck all on it I don't care about. But the old Mega Drive Games Collection on PS4 version and PS3, I got both of those, and you get the lovely option to actually play as Streets of Rage or as the bare knuckle. And I prefer to play the bare knuckle versions because that is the original game that's more balanced before they modified it for the American ones. The old rental market jacked up the difficulty, so you had to get renting the damn game. I never entered it. I just owned it, and it was difficult, and I played it, and I got good enough to beat it. So there, stupid rental market.
Yeah, your plan failed, Sega.
Your plan failed. But yeah, well,
Yeah,
right,
I only rented number 3 a couple of times. I was like, this is just too hard.
yeah.
I can't afford this.
I feel bad now, man, because we were talking about something else a while back, and you're like, I can't remember, it was a Mortal Kombat, or you had this one, but not the other one. It was like, it's like I had this game and you had the other game, and then it gets to this one, you had that game and I had that. It's like we had the opposite experience of that time back then.
Well, you know what, Johnny? That's why we complete each other. I'm the yin to your
That's
yang,
why
and
we're a
then we
tag
come
team.
together.
That's
Yeah, we're tag team. We make that
that's why
magic,
we're the
baby.
megapixels. We're unbeatable, brother. The megapixels are gonna run a maniac mile on you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The
We
megapixels
might finish
explode.
up today's episode there. Do you have any closing comments to say about Streets of Rage or Mega Drive or Sega or that amazing soundtrack or fighting games in general?
Well, one thing well, maybe a couple of things I'll say that have come to mind while discussing this today is I was kind of getting those similar vibes from like when we were discussing RoboCop and T2 and stuff like that, where you've got a team of people who are so passionate about creating and doing what they're doing that they're willing to go the extra mile. Because one thing you'll find, especially if you're reading or watching anything to do about the making of Streets of Rage 2, a lot of the team, and it wasn't a massive team, a lot of guys, they just worked extra hours all the time. They stayed
Yeah,
late.
small team.
it's a small team. They everybody kind of chipped in and made that extra effort to make something special, and that's how you got such a such a massive improvement over what had come before. And it's a bit like, we spoke about this with Mortal Kombat 2. It's that same type of mentality of we had a kind of a surprise hit. It was way more successful than we thought it could be. Now that we have a bit of momentum, we're going to do a sequel, and that sequel is going to have a lot of the stuff we wanted to have in the first game, but now we've got the backing to do it, and we've
Yeah,
got the drive to do it, and we're just going to go balls to the wall and make the best possible game we can. And I think that's what they did with Streets of Rage 2. They just went all out and delivered a classic. And for me, it's one of those games where, like yourself, I'll either if I'm arsed and I want to go fiddling around with cables, I could put it in the Mega Drive and play it that way. I do still play it though on a kind of best of Sega collection I have on the Xbox, and also on an emulated version on the PC. So I will still put the game on, give it a spin. It's got a great pick up and play kind of you know vibe to it. And unlike Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and the kind of 1v1 fighting games, I'm not as exposed for being like an old man with old man hands. I can still do a lot of my tricks and get by and still complete the game. So I don't feel like an absolute washout playing it either. So I'll always enjoy it for that reason.
yeah. It's like for me, it's easily in my pantheon or my top 10 of all time video game greats that I played back then a lot, that I've come back to every few years since. I still play it now and then, and I can see still playing into the future. Like I'll put this up there with Cadillacs and Dinosaurs and Aliens versus Predator, which are my other favorite side-scrolling beat 'em up games. I can happily play any day and not get bored, such as the quality of the character designs, the settings, the bosses, the stages, the animation, the music, the all important button timings and rhythms on the combos, which are just unparalleled because Western developers weren't doing that kind of thing. Like I grew up playing the arcades, moved on to the old SEGA Master System Mega Drives, which were trying to do arcade ports back then. So there was the time in my life where video games where if it wasn't a Japanese developer, I didn't give a shit. I mean, yes, there was UK micros and 8 bits, and there was old 70s piece, early mainframe PC games, Magnavox into the 70s, 80s. There was more PC stuff. I was never a PC gamer, and I'm not now. So I just nothing against it. PC is probably the greatest platform of all time as far as video games for new and old stuff. But I've always been a console and arcade gamer. Always loved that Twitch fast action shit. And you can kind of follow a line through like Capcom, Konami, Streets of Rage, Ninja Turtles, Aliens vs Predator, playing Doom, playing Quake, just fast paced cocaine fucking gaming, man. Where it just like it's the only kind of games that catch up to my like mental processing and action speed. And I used to go to martial arts in real life years ago, and I want to and like they're just on my level, they sync up with me, and very few games do. And so many video games are just too goddamn slow. Like I don't want to play a text adventure. Give me something where I can punch or grapple or do a melee thing, God of War style, and it needs to be 30 or 60 frames per second. If it's too slow, I can't be bothered with it. It might as well be like Pikachu, Detective Pikachu, or Text Adventure, or Zork, or something like that. Totally different level.
Zork.
I was just looking at something about that earlier today. So got his legacy, important game. Not what we're talking about, but it's not
No.
very slow
Maybe
pace.
someday though. Maybe someday we'll do the Zork
Maybe
special.
someday. Oh, an old man or an episode 999, like Zork 1 through 3.
The Zork
It'll take
anthology.
500 years to type it in. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll
No,
finish
it's
up there, man.
definitely it's been a great chat. It's been a great chat. I love talking about a Streets of Rage too, and it's
Anytime, man. I had my notes
Or
of
that be
rage.
added?
I had my fists of rage. I was well prepared.
Streets of Rage 2 is to video game sequels what, Aliens and T2 are to movie
Oh, for
sequels.
sure, for sure.
It's the
Like
big it's
objectively,
big time.
my favorite game of the series is Streets of Rage 3 for the levels and music, but objectively, number 2 is the best game for the sequence, the levels, the way it flows through. Number 3 was a bit unfinished. Number 2 is still the best game in the series to this day. Not knocking number 4, good game, not as good as Streets of Rage 2 and 3. It's just a cover version of those, which is still an excellent game. I'm not knocking it anyway.
Yeah. And let us know, folks. Let us know what you think. Are you Streets of Rage 2 people? Are you Streets of Rage 1 or 3 people? Do you hate
Yeah.
Streets of Rage? Are you a Final Fight person? Are
Maybe you got a
you
keyboard
a
of rage and
person?
you're like, I hate you
Yeah.
in the comments.
Maybe you just don't like violence in video games, in which case,
No,
what
violence
can I
rocks in
say?
video games. If you
Sorry.
don't like violence, what are you doing here?
Yeah, it's the best place for it, actually, you might say.
I think so. That or show wrestling. Yeah, good old violence. Oh yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit of an outro here and then we'll be finished.